It's decision time. If you're in the market for a new grill, you've got lots of decisions to make. Like, should I get the newest offering from Kamado Joe or save a buck and maybe look at the oldest offering? And the oldest offering, we're trained as consumers to always want the latest and greatest. But some quick stats here. You can get a Big Joe Series 1 with about 40% more grill space and a 50% cost savings to something like the Kamado Joe Classic Series 3 behind me. So as I opened with decisions, but we're going to answer that question with my thoughts right now. Hey, I'm James from Smoking Dad Barbecue, and despite the amount of red that's going on here, I actually bought and paid for these two grills in question with my own money. The Classic Series 3 is my oldest purchase, and this is what originally lured me away from Big Green Egg, as the level of innovation from 1 to 2 to 3 eventually became the straw that broke the camel's back, largely on the innovation of the slow roller. And my most recent purchase is a Kamado Joe Series Big Joe 1, because I want to be able to compare Big Joe 1 to Big Joe 3, and by consolidating to Big Joe I can share accessories between these two grills and save a bunch of space in the process, which is why my Classic 3 is for sale. But before it goes and is picked up by the new owner, I wanted to answer this question that I get nearly every day. James, in local currency here, that guy is about 2,500 bucks. This guy's about 1,500 bucks. Is it really worth $1,000 more just to get the latest and greatest? Plus, there's other differences here. The Big Joe versus the Classic offers a lot more real estate. So you're getting about 43% more grid space in the Big Joe versus the Classic. Plus, the grid expander accessory for the Big Joe is the entire grid size of a Classic. So it just birthed the Classic right on top. So you get a ton of space. And from a price, again, local currency for me, it's over a 50% savings. And so that gives me enough budget to do a bunch of things. If we wanted, buy a slow roller, we could do that. A grid basket, a charcoal basket, one of my favorites. A vent cap if you wanted to use something different. A soapstone, Joe Tisserie, which are on clearance at Lowe's nearby. And all of that, and still have about $100 left over. So this is a really important question. If I was in the market and choosing right from scratch, what would I decide? Well, I don't know, so I'm going to walk you through my thinking, the pros, the cons of each, and see if it helps you make an informed decision. Is it really worth getting the latest and greatest, or can you get a smoking deal on a Series 1? So before we answer the question, can I just get a Series 1, save a bunch of money, and call it a day? I want to do a crash course on some of the differences between Series 1, Series 2, Series 3. Then we'll get into the size differences from the Classic versus the Big Joe, and then peel back the onion a little bit further and get into what I would do in your situation if I was facing this exact question right now. So starting with the Series 1, this might be the original generation from Kamado Joe, but just because it's the original doesn't mean it's shipping today exactly as it did when it first came out over a decade ago. Kamado Joe has done a couple upgrades along the way that keep this inside a little bit more similar to what I got on my brand new Series 3 Big Joe when I unboxed that. And that is the firebox. So the original firebox design was all one piece. And this is one of the things that I found a little bit frustrating coming from Big Green Egg land for nearly a decade before I found or ventured over to Team Red with Kamado Joe, is that these one-piece fireboxes are subject to cracking. So under a heat cycle of going from cold to hot, hot back down to cold, they would crack. And depending on your dealer, if they had one in stock or not for warranty, there has been times where I lost an entire summer waiting for firebox components to be replaced. That's one of the most important things at protecting your base. And so when Kamado Joe came out with the AMP, the multi-piece firebox, this is one of those things that gives the firebox some room to expand and contract without cracking any of that important protection level or layer between your firebox and your lower base of your grill. And so I was really pleased when I brought this home from Lowe's, opened up the packaging to see that I got the exact same multi-piece firebox in my Series 1 Big Joe versus my Series 3 Big Joe at nearly double the cost. So while the firebox may be the same, there are several differences. So starting with Series 1 and Series 2, they are both the exact same physical dimension. It's not until Series 3 where those growth hormones come into effect, and the Series 3 grill grows 4 inches in height, which is why you see the Series 1 here on a little platform, whereas the Big Joe Series 3 is sitting that much lower, and yet the grid heights and the tops end up the exact same height. That's because, again, Series 1 and 2 grills are about 4 inches more compact. This means we get a couple differences. Both Series 1 and Series 2 are the same here in the sense that you're getting a 2-level divide and conquer rack versus a 3-level divide and conquer rack. This also affords extra space for things like the slow roller, where on the Big Joe Series 3, I can get away with what I call my double indirect method, where I can put in my slow roller, put on my 3-tier divide and conquer rack, put on my included heat deflector plates in the middle level, still have space for a drip pan before getting to my cooking grid. So we get lots of separation from the fire in the Series 3. Series 1 and Series 2, just based on their physical dimensions, anything that you're cooking is parked that much closer to the firebox or the fire itself. Now, what are some of the other differences between Series 1 and Series 2? Well, the first one you'll notice, and I can demonstrate here on the Series 1 versus 3, is the airlift hinge. So this is the traditional spring assist hinge. So this is a one-handed effort where takes a little bit of effort, and you definitely know it's there. It's not going to be something that my little kids are able to pick up on their own, nor would I want them, especially since you start to get down to a right about here, and you're maybe 5-6 inches away, and this is where you start to feel the full weight of the dome, and it's a lot heavier. So that airlift hinge is one of the best hinges, I think it's the best hinge I've used on any Kamado. Not only is it made exceptionally well, it holds up to heat cycles. So compared to what I was used to on my Big Green Egg, you do a pizza and your dome has a huge overbite or underbite. I go through countless different cycles of cooks, and I don't have to adjust this depending on what I just cooked. It just stays the same. So that airlift hinge is a big difference. The next difference coming from Series 1 to Series 2 is the gasket. So you get an oven grade gasket, which is going to help seal things in. Now on this grill, you don't have any problems with the seal because the weight of the dome is going to be providing ample pressure. But this gasket, I've used felt for over a decade. It's just not going to hold up as well, especially under those high heat cooks. And so while the durability is going to be less, the repair cost is also going to be less. And so you can pick up some of these on Amazon for $10, $20. And so if you have to do it every 3 to 5 years, which is what I averaged on my Big Green Egg when I was last using a felt, it's not super expensive. But the cost here, or the trade-off, again, is just a great seal and something that can take extra heat. And where you really notice that is if you're using something like the Joe Tisserie or the Dojo, which is sitting directly on your felt gasket. And so the mesh gasket holds up to those higher temperatures of having that metal get super heat soaked sitting right on it. It holds up far better than the felt does. The other difference between Series 1 and Series 2 comes down to the control tower top. Now, the control tower top from a design perspective is hands down the best vent cap design that I've ever used. The ability to have easy identifiable lines, so we can go right to 1/8 of an inch on the other side of the line, makes it really easy to explain vent settings, plus the rain protection, not that thankfully it matters anymore for me under a pergola, and it doesn't move when you open your dome. So depending on how you have the daisy wheel, or the other problems that some people have had is if they have it set and you open your dome, there you hear it's moved, and now I have to remember or notice where my my vent settings have gone. So all of these issues, rain, movement when you open the dome, and ease of finding your vent setting have all been improved on the Series 2 and Series 3 Joes with the control tower top. The original, though, has a few hidden advantages of its own. So while it's maybe not as easy to communicate the exact vent setting, and it moves, and it's not rainproof, it's made out of cast iron. So as this wears and starts to get gummed up, it's not a painted surface, it's cast iron, and so I can just scrub that rust off, put a little bit of oil on, throw it in the grill, re-season it, and it comes out good as new. Whereas the control tower tops, as they're painted, will continue to perform exactly as they did the day that they were new, but they wear and tear a little bit differently and don't give you the option for seasoning it and making it that fresh black, right from the factory look the day that you get, and I absolutely love. So that's a bit of a difference between the control tower tops. So points for design for the Series 2, Series 3, points for maintenance on the Series 1. So that's it for the differences between Series 1 and Series 2 grills. So again, quick recap, firebox is now the same. So the differences between 1 and 2 are really coming down to the airlift hinge on Series 2, not on Series 1. The mesh gasket on Series 2, felt on Series 1, the control tower top on Series 2, and the daisy wheel on Series 1. Series 3, this is where things get really interesting, as in addition to everything you get with Series 2, so the airlift hinge, the gasket, and the control tower top, it adds that 4-inch extra height, a 3-tier divide and conquer rack, the slow roller, which is what pushed me over the edge. Again, I came across an article in Engadget, how a Harvard class changed barbecue, and just walked through some of the science of how that helps circulate air 20 times better, as well as an upgraded cart and metal side shelves. So unlike Series 1 and Series 2, where these come with a cart with plastic shelves, if you took a hot deflector plate out and just set it on there and left it for a long time, that could damage or deform the plastic, whereas the metal side shelves on the Series 3 can take any hot surface that you want to put on it. So that's a quick overview of the generations Series 1, 2, and 3. Now that we understand a little bit about the differences, let's get into the exact decision that you might have to face for a budget that has you looking at a Big Joe Series 1 versus a classic Series 3. So I'll get you to our next chapter down below, but first I'd like to thank Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for anyone who loves learning and wants to explore their creativity as well as learn new skills. Invest in yourself and your personal growth. Have a specific skill that you want to learn? Skillshare classes are ad-free, so you're able to stay in the zone when you're exploring new skills. As well, there's always new premium classes launching each week, so there's always something new for you to discover. And now, the entire catalog is available with subtitles in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and German. So I've shared before that the first class I ever took on Skillshare was one that I was researching and found on Skillshare of how to add those green screen elements, which are those pop-up visuals that I'm now using in my videos all the time. Thanks, Skillshare. But the course that I'm actually checking out now and something that I'm struggling with is, as you may get the idea, it's just me and my camera on a tripod. There's no other help when it comes to making these videos. And so I'm only able to get sort of that shot once. For example, if we are slicing into a brisket, you only get to do that once. There's no undo, no takebacks. And so what might work great for YouTube, which is in landscape mode, doesn't fit so well when you try and flip that into portrait for Instagram. And so there's a couple tips and tricks, and specifically a class that I came across that I'm now taking, and it's called Video for Instagram. Tell an Engaging Story in Less Than 1 Minute by Helise Navarez, which I hope is going to allow me to pick up some extra tips and tricks on how I can take those big moments in videos and cooks that we're doing and sharing and make them available for others to enjoy on platforms like Instagram, where the video layout is not the same as portrait mode versus landscape mode. I hope that you'll get to experience the same joy that I had when that green screen idea finally clicked and I was able to add these videos. And to help make that dream a reality, I'm pleased to let you know that Skillshare is offering a 1-month free trial to anyone who checks out the link in my description box down below and or uses the code SmokingDadBarbecue. So again, check out the link in the description box down below and use the code SmokingDadBarbecue to receive a 1-month free trial to Skillshare. Now, back to the action. So this is where things get really interesting. Things stay super simple. If we are comparing Classic 1, 2 to 3, showing the differences there really come down to all that new features that I mentioned Series 3, plus the extra 4 inches in height. That is super easy to understand. Where it gets tricky and also very interesting is when you start comparing a Classic size to a Big Joe size. So while this is the Classic Series 3, which is the newest and 4 inches taller, and this is the Big Joe Series 1, which didn't get the growth spurt yet, there's some really interesting things going on here in the dimensions between these two. So despite this being the elongated version, if you were to get out a tape measure, and I'll show you here, and we measure the distance from the lowest possible area that we could have some coals to the lowest possible area that we could have our food cooking, there's actually more clearance on the Big Joe Series 1 than there is the Classic Series 3 with that extra height advantage. Speaking of size and dimensions, another area that the Big Joe shines versus the Classic, and this is true no matter what generation you're looking at, is the extra space you get with the accessories. So I'll illustrate here with the soapstone. So I'll put on the Big Joe soapstone, the Classic soapstone, and the Joe Jr. soapstone, just to give you a sense of the scale that you get going, between the different family members. And this comes in really handy when you're starting to do multi-zone cooking or maybe cooking an entire meal. The Classic can absolutely fit an entire packer brisket, even if you have to use a few wood chunks or a V-rack to drape it in until it shrinks. You can cook pretty much anything your heart desires on a Classic. This is not a question of capability. It can absolutely do it and turn it out really well. Where it starts to become a limitation is if you want to add something else. What if you want to throw on a side pan of bacon Brussels sprouts or something like that? This is where the Big Joe really shines, because you get just that much more space on your half moon, creating completely new all one grill meal ideas. So instead of one pot, we're doing one grill, but you can cook absolutely everything. And this advantage continues into other accessories like the Joe Tisserie. So where the Joe Tisserie on the Classic can fit one chicken, maybe two smaller chickens side by side, or a turkey, the Big Joe has so much space. It actually comes with two sets of forks, so you can do two different birds or do a bird and maybe a steak side by side and take advantage of all that extra real estate. So decision time. How are we going to make sense of all of these differences now between the generations as well as the family members and say, what's the right grill for you? Well, there's a couple things that we can change and there's a couple things we can't change. We'll never be able to change here the grid height. Even though we can add in the slow roller and things like that, we are just going to eventually, reach a spot inside of our Big Joe where we cannot get away with the slow roller, double indirect, and a grid extender on top, which the Classic Series 3 can do and the Big Joe Series 3 can do. In the old muscle car world, there was that saying, there's no replacement for displacement, and this happens to be true here, where there are just limitations of what we can or cannot fit. There are some other things to consider if you're going also between a Classic and a Big Joe, which is the time to get our fire started. The Joe Jr. is the quickest. The Classic, as you would expect, being the middle size, is the middle speed, and the Big Joe being the largest takes the absolute longest. Now, I solve for that because I've got myself one of these Grill Blazer grill guns as my toy. Oh, I don't want to set that house on fire. Turn that off. And so with that, I'm able to go from cleaning up my grill, adding coal, starting a fire, and get my food on with nice clean smoke in about 23 minutes. But that's an extra cost, right? So that is, even though I have a save 10% code, it still ends up to be $100, $200. And so you have to factor that in, is that there's more ceramic here. I think the weight is going from 200 something pounds, I'll put it up on the screen, to over 300 pounds between the Classic and the Big Joe. So you're gaining a lot of extra ceramic that takes time to soak in that heat. So outside of time to come up to temperature, which you can solve with the torch, is fuel efficiency. So most of that extra fuel consumption happens on heating everything up. Once it's clicking along, I've been amazed that the vent settings on the Classic 3 to the Big Joe 3 are almost identical of one another despite the sizes, the size difference. And I've even done experiments where I've taken my charcoal basket from my Joe Jr., put it in my Big Joe, and I was able to do an all-day sort of rib cook, about 6 hours worth of heat at low and slow temperatures using only the amount of charcoal for the Joe Jr. But despite how efficient it is and being able to run 56 hours on a full basket, if we were to fill it up and just let it go, the Big Joe does use more fuel than the Classic does, which uses more fuel than the Junior. And so there's no hiding this either, is that the SUV is going to use more gas than the Prius. So while I'm no math expert and I've tried my best to figure out some of the cost differences, I think it's going to be in the neighborhood of about $1 per average weekday cook in extra fuel consumption for the Big Joe versus the Classic Joe. Doesn't sound like much, but if you cook every day, it's going to be a couple $100s of extra charcoal throughout the year. Outside of that, are there any other drawbacks to the Series 1 Big Joe versus Classic 3? Not that I can think of. So what would I pick? So my personal pick, and again, I can't stress enough, that is very much my personal opinion, what I like, what our family likes, and with our money, both of which these grills I bought and have gone through the experience of spending my own cash to get, I lean towards the Big Joe for a couple reasons. The Big Joe is my absolute favorite grill I've ever used. Now, that's largely all experience based on the Series 3, which is the best breathing Kamado I've ever used. Being able to get away with my double indirect setup, having full space for a drip pan, has just been such a refreshing experience, and I absolutely love it. So if I was facing, though, this dilemma and being able to get a Big Joe Series 1 for local currency about 900 to 1,000 less than a Classic 3, and I could add things that I know I want, like the slow roller, like the basket, optional if I wanted to change the cap to something like that smokeware cap, and get accessories. My favorite too are the soapstone and the Joe Tisserie. I still have about $100 left in my pocket. I can't bring myself to ignore the Big Joe Series 1, and especially since I already have another Big Joe Series 1, I can share all those accessories. So Joe Tisserie, Dojo, soapstone, or cast iron, half moon, anything like that. I only need one, and I can share them between the two. So that is my personal reason. Other things that you'll be looking at, again, is space. These take up more space than the Classic. So if you are space limited, that is another reason. If you're not doing large cooks like brisket, ribs, pork belly, and you don't need the extra real estate, heating up the entire grill, just to throw on a chicken breast or something like that, is a bit excessive, especially since it does use more charcoal. And so if you find yourself either in a space constrained environment and maybe once a year you're going to do a brisket or ribs, absolutely. Go check out the Classic and especially the Series 3 with all those other benefits. But to come to our original question, if I've got a fixed budget and the Classic 3 is just a little bit of a stretch outside of what I wanted to spend, can I get an amazing grill, turn out some amazing food, and maybe over time that budget grows, or you get some birthday money, Christmas money, or anything like that, you're able to save up, you can actually add those little upgrades as you go that'll elevate the experience of a Series 1 and bring it much, much closer to a Series 3. That's it for today. Thanks so much for asking that question. This is one that came up in one of my recent members only lives. So if you want to be on the next one, check out the details down below, as well as links for all the products that I use and mention, especially those with save something codes. All the details I'll put down in the description below. That's it for today, though. I'm James from Smoking Dove Barbecue signing off. And remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.